Hello listeners everywhere. Welcome to the Archive of Audio Antiquities, a voyage into the vaults of wonders on the wireless. In a moment, Simon Exton and Ken Moss will be here to speak to you.
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the Archive of Audio Antiquities. I'm Ken Moss.
I'm Simon Exton.
This time we are listening to the BBC Radio Collection audio CD version of Doctor Who, The Smugglers. When the TARDIS arrives on a remote and wild stretch of the Cornish coast, its occupants little realise that they've arrived in the 17th century. The Doctor, Ben and Polly soon discover to their cost, however, that these are far from hospitable times. The local squire is at the head of a plot to offload contraband, while a long-rumoured hoard of stolen treasure has drawn attention to the village church. Inadvertently stumbling upon this web of deception and double-crossing, the time travellers are rapidly propelled into danger.
No use, I can't read it.
You think there'd be a few houses or something? I bet it's miles to a bus.
Well, there doesn't seem to appear any Victorian restoration. I think it could be any time after the 16th century.
Only it's not. It's good old 1966.
Well, I don't think so, somehow.
The church door is suddenly flung open. An old man steps out, brandishing what appears to be an antique flintlock pistol.
Hold fast, I say!
Oh, please, would you put that gun away?
Hold thy tongue, lad!
In her trouser suit, with her hair under a cap, the man has taken Polly for a boy. Cautiously, he approaches the Doctor.
You seem to be a gentleman, but why on foot with these lads as company?
Well, we stopped aside, sir, on our journey to walk along the cliffs, and unfortunately we got lost.
Thou art foreign?
No, we don't come from this part of the country.
Well, there's no more of ye than this.
No, just the three of us. You see, we are travellers looking for shelter.
And you came by road, and not from the sea?
No, sir, not by sea.
Very well, I cannot give thee shelter, but I can give thee sustenance and direction.
Thank you.
Come.
So he's a right one. What gear's he got on?
Yes, I'm afraid you're going to lose your bet, young man. That gentleman comes from the 17th century.
17th century?
First broadcast on BBC One between the 10th of September 1966 and the 1st of October 1966, this four-part adventure was the penultimate story for William Hartnell and the first serial of Season 4. Dr. Exton, do you have any alumni for us?
I do. Every single member of the cast is a Doctor Who alumnus and appeared in The Smugglers.
Would you, Adam, and believe it?
And the revenue man was in the Aztecs.
Well, the one that leaps out for me, probably not for you, is George A. Cooper, who was the caretaker in
Grange Hill. I remember.
Oh, I didn't know whether it was a bit after your time, that.
Grange Hill started in about 1977, so no, it's not after my time. I was never particularly interested in it, but I do remember watching it.
Yeah, but by the time he got into it, I think that was well into the 80s.
I was still at school in the 80s.
Late 80s, I think.
You're just continually moving the goalposts, really, aren't you?
On with the motley. Unashamedly, I loved this. The story itself is actually quite flimsy, isn't it?
It is. It's not as linear as Treasure Island was when we listened to that, because there's a Doctor storyline, there's a Ben and Polly storyline. And actually, there's a really, really nice Ben and Polly storyline, because certainly for the first couple of episodes, Polly's pretty much in charge, and Ben's kind of the damsel in distress who gets knocked out and needs looking after. Now, that does swap around a little bit when Polly is scared of the rat in the prison cell and has to send Ben over and get the straw.
Yeah.
But the whole end of episode 1 bit where the Doctor's been kidnapped and Ben's been knocked unconscious, it's all Polly driving it.
Yes, I suppose when you look at it that way. For the benefit of the listeners at home, a bit of background will probably help. The Smugglers was a television story that is now lost, but the audio of it still exists thanks to off-air recordings. It's been cleaned up by the audio god that is Mark Ayres and slapped out on shiny CD, and that's what we're listening to, with narration by Annika Wills.
Sounding wonderful.
Oh, she does, but she always does in narrations. Annika Wills plays Polly on television in the story, and she does the linking narration, and she's just got a lovely, crisp, warm voice. It's perfect for this. But all the setting of it, the churchyard, the inn, the pirate ship, the Cornish coastline, this actually did dreadfully on transmission. In fact, there wasn't a Doctor Who story that had lower viewing figures until Trial of a Time Lord. And listening to this, I honestly don't know why.
And looking at the telesnap, and I know we're not looking at this as a video piece, we're looking purely as an audio, but it is based on a TV show. So we can have a look at the telesnaps and see what it would have looked like. And the answer is absolutely gorgeous. The sets are amazing. The crypt set just looks beautiful and multi-level, and Pike's stateroom on his galley just looks fantastic.
And the costumes as well.
But BBC, you expect them to be able to do period stuff well.
That is true, and this is no different. You look at any of the production stills from this, but you can just hear it all. One thing that I could notice is the very obvious shift between location work, of which there was quite a bit in Cornwall for this, and moving into the studios. And it's very obvious that the churchyard is a studio.
And the other thing, which for once I noticed, no incidental music.
No incidental music at all. And I've got to be honest, I only noticed this because it was pointed out on the Missing Episodes podcast, which is a splendid podcast, which we've already recommended. But I don't think I would have noticed.
Normally, I don't notice good or bad incidental music, but I did notice the lack of incidental music on this even before it was pointed out on the Missing Episode podcast.
One thing to point out, you have in previous podcasts suggested that this story was actually filmed as part of the third series. And yes, it has come to light that it was. It was recorded, if not the previous year, certainly the previous season, and then held off at the start of this.
I know, I've been saying this for years.
You have. It just, for the time, seemed very, very unusual. But that means that the 10th Planet, which comes after this...
It's the only Hartnell story that was recorded in the season 4 filming block.
Yeah.
And you know what? You can tell, because Hartnell has deteriorated in just those couple of months.
He's certainly not himself.
There is a world of difference between his performance in this and his performance in the 10th Planet.
Story-wise, as I've said, The Smugglers is a little bit light, and I won't say it's padded, but there are contrivances to keep characters in certain places. So, for example, there's any number of times that the Dr. Ben and Polly could have just left, and the Doctor makes some flimsy excuse as to why they've got to stay. He gets himself inveigled in a plot to share the hidden treasure.
That one bit in episode 3 where Ben says, "Why don't we just leave?" So it's not there's any number of times. When else were they all together that they could just leave?
I think they made a bit of a... Not that it would have made a very exciting adventure, but they made a bit of a meal of it at the beginning of the episode 1 when they went to the inn. And, you couldn't possibly leave now, even though... Is it said that the tide's in? Is it what beach? There is no beach. The tide's in. So I'll give them that, but they have landed in a cave. But the Doctor is determined to be inveigled in this plot. As soon as he finds out, once he gets on board the ship, out comes the Madeira, and he's, I'd like a share of the treasure, please. I'll tell you where it is. He's also very, very good at solving riddles when he's not given the right riddle. The riddle to the treasure is given by a man who subsequently gets offed very soon in episode 1. And it's the names of 3 dead men.
Or even 4.
Ah, yes, but we don't know that yet. But one of the men's names is wrong. He says Smallwood, Ringwood and Gurney. It's actually Small Beer, but thankfully the Doctor mishears that.
Yes, and it was apparently one of those Hartnell fluffs where he gets it wrong and he gets it wrong all the way through. But if you look at the script, Hartnell is the one that is script perfect.
Oh no, it's not Hartnell that gets it wrong. It's whoever's Joe Longford.
Yes, I've always thought that a lot of the Billy Fluffs, as they call them, were actually him just playing absent-minded.
There is that argument, and if you look
at The Massacre...
that's the one, where he plays the Abbot of Amboise, and he is dead letter perfect.
I mean, his performance does change as he goes through, and he becomes a bit more absent-minded going along. But I take that more as character development rather than the fact that Hartnell was getting ill.
See, I've said this before as well. I know that he definitely was ill. That was the reason why he got sacked. But I genuinely don't think you can tell on screen. There's the odd time where you can hear he's got a bit of a chest infection or something. And the odd episode where he nips off for a rest or he's on holiday or whatever. I can't honestly say, hand on heart, that his performance is a bit ropey or he's clearly muddled or he's not making the best of it. Right up to the end, to be quite honest. If you're looking for it, you can see a shift. But I can't say that it's a bad performance or noticeably poor. And he was good to the end as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think 10th Planet's a very toned-down performance, and it doesn't help that he's pretty much not in the final surviving episode that we have.
That's true. Well, he's not in it, is he?
Is there not a filmed reprise at the beginning where he collapses?
No, that's a double.
Okay.
But this one, The Smugglers, it was the first one where they did extensive exterior filming. In fact, beyond the War Machines, I'm trying to think of another one where they did.
I think there was a fair bit in the Highlanders, wasn't there?
Yeah, but that came afterwards. But I think this is...
Oh, so before this. Okay.
Yeah. There was an exterior filmed shot for The Reign of Terror that wasn't Hartnell. Beyond that, I honestly can't think of any.
Wasn't there some for Time Meddler? Or was that just stock footage?
They were stock footage. Oh, and there was a bit for Dalek Invasion of Earth. But again, they were... I don't think that was the cast and crew. That was just Daleks in London, wasn't it?
Isn't there a bit with Barbara and Jenny running around Trafalgar Square at about 4 o'clock in the morning?
It's been a while since I've seen it, so I'll take your word for that. But either way, this was a big shift in terms of exterior filming, because it had certainly not been as extensive up to this point. There's some definite dialogue scenes outside, and the preceding serial, The War Machines, that had a bit. But up until this point, it was, if not entirely absent, very, very uncommon. So there was a definite shift from this point. What do we think of the supporting cast?
They do their job. I mean, it's difficult to tell purely on audio. Now, George Cooper clearly chews the scenery for all he is worth. And there were occasional moments where it was a touch Bill Oddie in the squeakiness, but... only very, very occasional. It was certainly quite a pantomime performance, but the whole thing's a bit pantomime.
It is a little. Everybody's double-crossing each other. Nobody really, apart from the revenue man, as he's referred to all the way through.
It's John Ringham, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. He's the only one of the incidental characters that's got any redeeming features whatsoever.
And almost the only one that survives.
Yes, the Squire just survives, but even he's not exactly covered in glory. He apparently changes his tune when he's guilt-tripped by the Doctor. Of course he is. Nothing to do with everybody being offed around him.
Oh, you're so cynical.
Yes.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Let's have a word about Jamaica. Now, Jamaica is the, unsurprising, black pirate. I've heard it said many a time that this is a racist performance or a racist inclusion. I am at a loss to understand why. He's the only one of the characters that gets anything at all complimentary said about him. I mean, admittedly, the captain kills him 20 seconds later, but he's clearly supposed to be from Jamaica. He's competent. He's well played. He's not...
He kind of isn't competent, really, because the only thing he does is get spooked by William Hartnell's cards and lets him escape. So I think competent is overstretching it.
Okay, for the time, the captain puts him in charge of guarding, and he's unlikely to do that if he didn't have faith in him. And then he comes up against Doctor Who. He doesn't stand a chance. But I can't really see how it's racist to have Jamaica included, apart from the fact that he's black and called Jamaica, which To me, it's no different to calling somebody Bristol in Sharda. You're more in tune with things like this. Explain it to me.
I can see how you could make the accusation if it was a modern production. I'm not sure even with that it would be justified. The Spaniard, Gaptooth, Holy Joe, they were all throwing nicknames backwards and forwards.
Oh, true. I'm just looking at the cast list here. I was about to say there are 2 people called Spaniard, but I think that's an error because both of the Spaniards are Derek Ware. Yeah, I just think it's a bit of a flimsy thing because you're not exactly screwing this down as to why it might be considered racist to have him in there. I thought he was actually no different to any of the other pirates.
And had there been any people of colour in the series before him?
I must admit, I'm struggling.
I can't think of any beforehand.
One will leap to mind as soon as we stop recording.
I mean, there's a very famous one in the story afterwards, but...
Again, another positive, well, very positive character. First ever black astronaut on screen anywhere in the world. This story in itself, though, there's a lot of running around from place to place. A lot of being captured, locked up, which is part of the course for Doctor Who. But the story
and
as a whole...
pirate stories.
Yeah, that is pirate stories, as we said with Treasure Island. So it's certainly not going against type, and it's typical for Doctor Who of this time. I don't think the story is up to much. But did I enjoy it? Hell yes. I really, really did. What about yourself?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was interesting and dynamic in a way that Treasure Island wasn't. And I appreciate that is a lot of writing of the time that Stevenson was writing. But it crackled along. It had an absolutely fantastic TARDIS team. They really did hit the ground running with those 3.
That's something we've not mentioned so far, actually, Ben and Polly. They entered the TARDIS at the end of the preceding story, The War Machines, and they'd been part of the story up to that point, but as far as 60s companions go, they could not have got a better pairing. I know you're on record many times.
Many times.
Many times for saying that they're your favourite companion pairing. I can fully understand why. They bounce off each other in completely different ways. Ben is sort of the skeptic that runs through a few stories. Certainly towards Power of the Dalek, he's skeptic in that about the Doctor himself after his regeneration. And Polly's a little more upbeat and proactive might not be the right word, but she's certainly a little bit more dynamic in terms of believing things and throwing herself in. The one thing I will say is, considering this is the first adventure, they take to it like ducks to water. As soon as there's a first sign of intrigue, yes, they want to get back to the TARDIS, but adventure, we'd better investigate. As soon as there's something amiss in the pub, they're straight on it. Let's find out. He could be the one who did this. They're straight in. What a great companion pairing right from the off. It was a foolish mistake to get rid of them so early.
With the way things had been set up, I'm not sure. The dynamic was completely wrecked by
Jamie
moving.
Yeah.
And I like Jamie, but I'd have preferred it if he'd been introduced towards the end of season 4 to give Ben and Polly a good run for their money.
Fully agree. And I think he made an excellent companion to Troughton's Doctor. But why they chose to introduce him so early, when there really wasn't room for a third companion, I have no idea. But alas, there we are. Should we rate this in earworms?
This is the song that never ends. Yes, it goes on and on, my friends.
I really enjoyed this.
Would it be a foolish ask how many earworms?
I think I'm going to go with a 8. It's not a flawless story, and it obviously wasn't designed as an audio story because episode 4 is a bit confusing. There's lots of fight sounds.
It does suffer a lot from massacre syndrome. Now, I adore the massacre, but it's a little difficult to follow on audio first time around. And I've not listened to this for years. I love The Smugglers, and I think it's one of those stories that is an overlooked classic, to be honest. If this turned up, it will be lauded. But it isn't, and it hasn't, and as such it will go... Yet. And as such it will go a little bit unregarded. Yes, I would have to agree with you. It's 8 out of 10 for me as well. I think the story's a little bit flimsy, but purely because I love it so much. The setting, anything piratical is always going to float my ship. It's wonderful, and when it is rediscovered, it will be an outright classic. Yeah, definitely.
It has so much good stuff going for it. It's a cracking story. From what we can see, it looks gorgeous. It's got fantastic performances from all three of the regulars. It's the last really good performance that Hartnell gives as the Doctor. It's the last really good historical, because I was never wildly keen on the Highlanders.
No, it's not one that I revisit either.
But then it's been a while since I listened to the Smugglers. So possibly I'm being a bit unfair to the Highlanders. We need to revisit that at some point.
And they'll continue singing it forever just because.
So it's time for recommending another podcast. It's Podcast of the Week. Dr. Exton, I know you've got one queued up for us. What is it?
It's one I absolutely love and may possibly have appeared on myself. Spoilers, I have. It's done by friend of Maverick Productions, Cy Hart. And it's just him having a lovely chat with fellow Doctor Who fans, an awful lot of them podcasters, but not all. It's the Library of Impossible Things. It has something of a MacGuffin in that you're supposed to bring an object to the library, but it's just a way of starting conversation. It's just people who love Doctor Who chatting about why they love Doctor Who and what their history with the show is.
And having heard your episode, and now several others, I can heartily concur. It's a great format. It's a lovely, warm, little chatty podcast where people get to talk about themselves for a change. And there's not many out there that do that, actually. Yeah, great format, very well recommended.
And very well worth listening to.
So with that, we bring our piratical season to a close. Next time, Dr. Exton, what have you got in the can for us?
A little something from Big Finish called Blood on Santa's Claw.
I don't know anything about this one. It's Colin Baker Doctor Who story, The End. So I'm going to be beautifully surprised for this one.
Yeah, I don't know anything more about it either, other than the name. We'll see what relation it has to Blood on Satan's Claw. Now, that's one of those things that people bang on about being a fantastic part of British folk horror in the same way as The Wicker Man is. It's an okay film. I don't think it's anything close to being what The Wicker Man is, but
let's find
we
out.
will see.
Until next time, boys and girls, thank you very much for listening again. See you next time.
Bye now.
The archive of audio antiquities featured Simon Exton and Ken Moss, and the announcer was Jenny at Blue Box 99. All featured soundtracks are the property of their respective producers, and no infringement of copyright is intended. Title music was by Edward White, and the programme was produced by Maverick Productions. For more information, please visit maverickproductionsuk.blogspot.com or find us on social media.